Hello and welcome. I'm Jono Hayes and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. And these are our top stories. President Trump says the Gaza ceasefire remains in place. That's despite the recent strikes as Witkoff and Kushner arrive in Israel. 8 priceless jewels are stolen from the Louvre Museum as police continue to hunt down the culprits and recover the artefacts. And the Epstein victim speaking out from beyond the grave. Virginia Giuffre's memoirs are revealed, detailing damning allegations against Prince Andrew. US President Donald Trump says a ceasefire in Gaza is still in place. That's despite Israeli military strikes against Hamas over the weekend. Now, the IDF has accused Hamas of breaching the deal after 2 soldiers were killed in Rafah. Meanwhile, Hamas say they're committed to the ceasefire. Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, have travelled to Israel today to meet members of Netanyahu's government. And here's a reminder of what President Trump told reporters on board Air Force One. Have a listen.
We want to make sure that it's going to be very peaceful with Hamas. And as you know, they've been quite rambunctious. They've been doing some shooting, and we think maybe the leadership isn't involved in that. You know, some rebels within. But either way, it's going to be handled properly. It's going to be handled toughly, but properly.
Is the ceasefire still in place?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined in the studio by Arabiya senior presenter Rawia Alami, and writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue is joining us live from Florida. Thanks to both of you for joining us on W Extra tonight. Rawia, we'll turn to you first on that. It seems it's a bit fragile right now, this ceasefire. What are we looking at? A lasting truce, or is this a pause in the fighting?
Well, the ceasefire remains intact, yet on paper, as they say, and it is extremely fragile in reality on the ground. Both Israel and Hamas have been accusing each other of multiple violations in the past 24 hours alone, especially after the incident in Rafah. 2 Israeli soldiers, as you've mentioned before, have been killed, and almost 45 Palestinians have been killed after this incident. Now, it is obvious that the Americans are very eager for this ceasefire to hold, and it was very obvious with what President Trump said on Air Force One. We've listened to him just a bit ago. Basically, he said that it is still holding. He even said that if there were any violations, he doubts that the Hamas leadership are involved in it. But let's look at the facts. There are so many different challenges. One of them is finding the remains of the deceased or dead Israeli hostages inside Gaza. Hamas has been trying to find the rest of the bodies. It's very difficult with the equipment that is available in Gaza right now. Yet Israel has sent many signals saying that it is willing to escalate if these bodies are not released and handed over to the Israeli side. Not just that, I mean, there are so many different ambiguities also within the first phase of the Gaza peace plan. Ambiguities to do with the Israeli withdrawal schedules, even with the withdrawal lines, up to the point that the Israelis have had to put today also giant yellow blocks, cement blocks, to mark out the yellow line that they're talking about, instead of electronic maps that they've been sending to, or that the civilians have been looking at, but not being able to decipher and to know exactly where is that yellow line. So it doesn't, to be honest, it doesn't seem like it's a very strong ceasefire. It's very fragile. It might not hold.
Phase 1. Like, we can't, if we don't get past this, we can't get on to phase 2, and we can't even get past phase 1.
That's true, yet they are pushing for phase 2 now, and that's why Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and even J.D. Vance, the vice president, are going to be in Israel, the 3 of them, tomorrow. Kushner and Witkoff have already arrived in Israel, pushing talks for the second phase of the ceasefire, even though the first phase hasn't
really
been
progressed. Esther,
yet.
I'll turn to you on this. As Rawia mentioned there, Witkoff and Kushner will be on ground, but how significant is their role likely to be in these negotiations?
I think extremely significant. I mean, Jared Kushner from the previous administration received a lot of criticism for basically being a nepo appointee, being the son-in-law of the president. But he has spoken a lot about learning from lessons from the previous administration and how to manage relations between a very complicated parties in the Arab leaders and Israel and Hamas. And I think what we're seeing now, and this is part of the reason why there's been so much positive energy and jubilation, is that those lessons have actually borne fruit, because now you can see that this basically very fragile peace is being held up by Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff's work, and that America is actually now effectively the last vanguard against particularly Israel doing anything that would be in the long-term interests of peace in the region. So I don't think we can understate how significant it is. I mean, in the context of sort of Hamas and Israel tiptoeing around this very fragile ceasefire, Jared Kushner made it very clear that this is just a ceasefire. It's just a military solution. It's in no way a political or even structural peace or solution. It's just the first stage to something that's more permanent. And so you can see that the Americans are very keen that this ceasefire holds. I mean, of course, we've seen this skirmish between already Hamas and the IDF, but I wouldn't say that means that the ceasefire is necessarily broken. I just think it's taking the form that we've expected any sort of stopping of military hostilities between the two sides to look at. We have to remember that in the wake of the Hezbollah and Israel ceasefire in November of last year, you had Hezbollah militants fire at Mount Dov and injure Israeli soldiers, and Israel responded in kind by striking at Lebanon. And since that strike, there has been no escalation of violence or any tension between Hezbollah and Israel. And I think this is what you're seeing again. You're reestablishing the line. And I think Hamas's fear is that now that the living hostages have been released, they're terrified that Israel has basically no deterrent from escalating violence. And so this is why the role of the Americans is so important, because more than anything, Hamas is basically putting their trust in the Americans, because trust between Israel and Hamas have broken down so considerably, especially after those strikes against failed strikes, I should say, against Hamas officials in Doha, really escalated tensions. And from what Jared Kushner said, basically forced Donald Trump to get Bibi Netanyahu to apologize to the leader of Qatar, which I'm sure is something that he doesn't dream of on a daily basis. So they are basically the glue and chewing gum and tape that's holding this whole fragile situation together. And I'm sure for most parties in the region, their hope is that, phase 2 can be accomplished relatively quickly, so that this ceasefire effectively solidifies, and so that any kind of deviation from the norm will really not be in the interest of the party involved.
And a lot at stake as well, I think, from the US's point of view, but also from Hamas's point of view, who said they're willing to work towards this ceasefire becoming a peace plan. Rawia, we're hearing as well, and this when I spoke earlier on to a representative from Israel who'd said that it's possible Hamas are withholding bodies of the dead. If they are, I'm struggling to think what would be the benefit of Hamas withholding those bodies, and what might be the actual reason that the bodies are not being released back to Israel.
Well, I mean, Hamas has more to lose in this entire thing, a lot more than Israel. So and it has proven that it is much more difficult for them to fulfill and implement the terms of the Gaza peace agreement, at least when it comes to the first stage. As we talked and we said before, it is extremely challenging to find these remains. We're talking about remains that are possibly under piles and a lot of rubble, possibly remains that are in destroyed tunnels, and there is no heavy equipment.
So there's nothing on ground, and it's not allowed to enter into Gaza.
No, that's the whole point. There no heavy equipment to be able to get to dig these bodies up inside Gaza. The Israelis are not allowing heavy equipment nor foreign teams to come and help to find these bodies. I also cannot think of a reason why Hamas would be withholding the release of the bodies if they find them. Yet, there are signals that Israel wants, or at least is willing to escalate this into probably a ceasefire violation, if it wasn't for the, I think, American pressure. Just because America has a lot President Trump has a lot at stake.
A lot riding on this.
Yes, when it comes to this peace deal, they are very, very eager not to let it fall. And that's why we see, you know, the two envoys in Israel, as I said earlier. We see the vice president also there. We see them pushing to try and get the first phase implemented so that we can get to the real issues, the real nitty-gritty problems, basically, in the second phase.
As we're talking about the real issues, and let's talk about the Gaza civilian population on ground. And Esther, I think there's been a lot of press about this in the last couple of days, that Hamas are commandeering the aid. That's the reports that are coming out of Israel as well. Does that, even if it is true, really justify not sending aid into people who so desperately, desperately need it right now? And this humanitarian crisis just continues to spiral out of control.
Of course not. And that's something that Jared Kushner has said he's quite keen on, pushing through with, which is opening more humanitarian aid corridors within Gaza, but also assuaging the fears of the Israelis that this could be a way for Hamas to rearm, because we do know that one of the fears that Hamas has, like we said, now that they've released the hostages and they're trying to work their way through returning the dead hostages, is that there is no real deterrent for the Israelis to not restart hostilities with basically all the cards in their favor. And what Hamas is doing effectively is trying to hold on to whatever scraps of power that it possibly can. And of course, a way to do that is by withholding aid or being the ones that control aid. I don't think the world understands how difficult the task of weeding out the cancer of Hamas rule is going to be in this region. And I think they're holding on to any hope that they have. But of course, that's no excuse. I mean, Israel rightly received a lot of criticism when it closed humanitarian corridors and basically left the Gazan population to fend for itself with regards to whatever food stocks that they had for a period of 3 months. I mean, that is just, whichever way you look at it, is completely unacceptable. So again, the fact that Jared Kushner in particular has been putting a lot of emphasis on opening up humanitarian corridors and not really treating the ability of Gazans to access food, which is one of the most basic things that human beings should have access to. And using that as a way to derail peace negotiations, I think that's a positive sign. I think it's quite clear that this is really where America is drawing a line in the sand. I mean, for months, we've been looking at what would be the red line for America. Would it be, basically stopping food aid from getting in? Would it be, further strikes? Would it be a timeline on this and making sure hostilities stop after a year or 6 months or whatever? Clearly, the strike in Doha really angered the Trump administration, whichever way you look at it. And so I think now the Americans are more willing to say this is our red line. And, the Israeli population as well, which is something we've not looked at specifically, they are going through a period of analysis. They're reflecting a lot. These 2 years have been really just gruesome for both sides. But seeing those images of Israeli families receiving their loved ones back has really kind of changed the conversation now that's going on in Israel. It looks like things are coming to a close, and now they have to look forward. Naftali Bennett was saying, turn the page. Israel has had to deal with this for the last 2 years, much damage to its international reputation, however way you look at it. And so they have to find a way to look forward. And I don't think tolerating starving Gazans is really the where they want to be heading towards. So, there's a lot of soul searching that's going to be happening over the next few weeks for sure.
And for sure, a developing story in the next couple of days, as well as the US envoy arrives on ground. Rawia, Esther, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. We're going to move on to our next story. Now to the Louvre Museum in Paris, which remains closed today after thieves took off with priceless artefacts over the weekend. Police continue to search for the culprits. The race is against time. The missing French crown jewels include a tiara, a sapphire necklace and sapphire earrings. Speaking earlier today, French Justice Minister Darmanin said that the French people feel like they too have been robbed. Have a listen to this.
I think all of the French people this morning, or a large majority of them, feel like they have been robbed, in the same way as when the Notre Dame was burning. It was our church that was burning, even when we weren't Catholic. Having such important jewelry stolen in such an incredible way, it of course looks bad, and it also gives a very negative image of France. There are many museums in Paris, many museums in France, with priceless values in these museums. The fact that these display cases were not secured, it's a question that we can ask.
Esther, this really feels like we're having a discussion about a movie plot. It's been called the theft of the decade. Give us the top-line info about what has actually happened here and why this has made such international headlines. Why is it so huge?
I mean, this is a national embarrassment that only really the French could pull off in such spectacular fashion. It pains me to say. This heist, I mean, from every perspective, is just ludicrous. In broad daylight, at around 9:30 in the morning, you had men who basically posed as construction workers that took advantage of a part of the Louvre that was undergoing construction to basically steal these jewels, saw off the glass casing that was surrounding these jewels and steal them in a 7-minute heist, getting away on mopeds. One of the individuals, who was actually filmed by some people in the museum, was a very, very overweight man in a high visibility jacket who literally managed to get on a moped and flee away with these priceless jewels, to the extent that they actually dropped one of the jewels, which was Empress Eugenie's crown, which is a pearl and diamond encrusted crown worth, it's probably priceless, basically. And it was found crushed on the side of the road by the gendarmerie when they were pursuing these thieves. Presumably they have, other items of jewelry that are so priceless that they I don't know why they decided to leave this particular one on the side of the road. But it's so ludicrous, especially when you hear reports that there were actually members of staff in the Louvre that were complaining about understaffing. This is a place that receives 10 million visitors a year, and yet in the space of 7 minutes, early in the morning, in broad daylight, you have these men that don't seem to be rocket scientists that manage to basically slip away with these jewels. And I think the feeling that is kind of going around in France right now is this is Macron's France, which has literally become the statement of everything that goes wrong in France over the last few years. It's just the sense of decline, the sense that nothing is working, the sense that, probably the most well-known places in Paris, other than the Eiffel Tower, which receives millions of visitors a year, couldn't even be guarded sufficiently, should probably save a pittance, I would imagine. I mean, it just reeks of incompetence, and it's so shocking and sad. But I do think the statement by that French minister that all of France feels robbed is a bit of an exaggeration. I'm sure most people don't feel like they're missing personally hundreds of millions of euros worth of precious jewels.
And just, you mentioned the most visited, Esther, but also probably, and this is factually, the most heavily guarded museum in the world. Yet somehow it seems to have kind of dipped here a little bit. It's difficult not to find amusement in this story, even though priceless artefacts have gone missing, which is a travesty to the world of art, but also to the museum itself. But Rawia, at the end of the day, it is now up against the clock for investigators to try and actually retrieve these again. It's pretty important they get them back soon.
Literally, it is a race against time, against hours and days, and they have 1 week exactly. If, apparently, the police, they have 1 week. If they can manage to find the culprits within that week, then the stuff, the jewels that they stole might still be there. Yet, if it takes more than 1 week, then maybe it is lost forever.
So what will happen to the
Because
jewels?
apparently, the thing is, I mean, these are very, very famous jewels. They're, the crown jewels, they are known, therefore they are unsellable. It's very hard to sell them. The only way you can basically move them around is you need to dismantle these jewels. They will have to melt the gold and the silver. They would have to dismantle the diamonds and then try to cut the diamonds and sell them that way. And this way they will indeed disappear forever. But it is, I mean, it's obviously it's not entertaining. This is terrible what happened. Yet, I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched Lupin. It's a Netflix show
yep.
or Lupin. I mean, even the French media were talking about this, the similarities, striking similarities between the two heists. They're saying that the robbery, this theft on Sunday was just taken out of a script of a Lupin episode, basically. It's exactly the same when it comes to speed, meticulous planning, even the Parisian street-level creativity of maneuvering the security and getting away. It's exactly the same. It's unbelievable, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great Netflix show when it gets released, because that's gone in 420 seconds. Esther, I know we said that these are hot property right now. There's probably a market for everything. I mean, we always hear about the ivory trade. Ivory is pretty much untouchable, but there's still a market out there for it. Surely somebody is out there willing to pay some money for priceless crown jewels.
Oh, yes. And I suspect they probably did their research before they carried out this highly risky move of stealing these jewels. Of course, they can melt down the gold, they can cut the diamonds, and then, they'll basically become inconspicuous jewels on the market, like all the other jewels that you see, or precious stones that you see. I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that they probably have already melted these down. And we have to remember that the era that these precious stones are from, they are probably the highest quality, very massive, very clean and clear cut. I mean, they're probably of the most impressive quality. I really don't think it's going to be a very difficult task for them to manage to sell bits of them off if they haven't already. And that's I think the real tragedy here, because you can envisage a world, and I think this is probably more likely, where the police will not find the perpetrators or the jewels. I mean, you have people talking about the fact that they could coordinate cell phone signals, but these are not amateurs. I mean, even anyone who knows the basic dealers, they use disposable phones. If anyone's seen Breaking Bad, you know that they can just smash up their phones within 30 seconds and go buy a new one. They're probably not going to use the phones that they regularly use. Of course, they wore masks. They masqueraded as members of the construction staff on site. So I think they've covered all bases. And this kind of is reminiscent of the jewel heist attack against Kim Kardashian, again in Paris, that led to a trial 4 years later, but was largely unresolved. So I unfortunately don't think that France is going to get these jewels back. And I think this has been a massive blow to Macron's presidency, which is already in the toilet, really.
I mean, and Rawia, to that point as well, it is a bit of a... The meltdown may not just be for the jewellery, but the French government in itself is having a bit of a meltdown as of late, as we're fully aware. Is this putting French authorities under extreme pressure? First of all, to get results, but also just kind of indicative of what's happening in France right now?
Absolutely. The French government is indeed under intense and immediate pressure to get results. Even the French President Emmanuel Macron, he promised that they will get the jewels back and that they will get results very soon. The thing is, I mean, this is not just a regular theft or robbery. We are talking about they're stealing a national treasure. And with everything that's been going on in France recently, with the political crisis, the recurring political crises, let's say, this is basically very embarrassing for the government. And it really poses some serious questions about security generally in Paris and around the Louvre specifically as well. Now, as well as Esther mentioned, there were the staff were saying that this is years of underfunding, years of understaffing, and very lax security measures around the Louvre, even though, as you rightly said, this is
be the most
protected museum, the most famous museum in the world. It's very ironic.
Before we wrap this up, Esther, I want to just check with you very quickly. Aside from the large-framed gentleman on a moped that you mentioned, are there any other suspects, or is it all just speculation right now about who might be responsible and who might be behind this?
At the moment, there is no other kind of lines of inquiry with regards to who would have been responsible for this. I think the reason why the large individual has become emblematic of this, because he was actually caught on film. So it's a bit grainy, but he was a very, very overweight man in a high visibility jacket who, I mean, on a normal day, you would just assume is a construction worker. And this person managed to get on a moped and not crash it, but actually get away on it. It's just incredible.
Esther, Rawia, thank you both so much for your time on that. Let's move on to our next story. Excerpts from Nobody's Girl, which is the memoir that was penned by Jeffrey Epstein victim Virginia Giuffre, has been made public. It's a day before its actual publication, which is due tomorrow. Now, the book details liaisons with Prince Andrew, as well as the abuse that was endured from Epstein. Miss Giuffre died by suicide in April of this year, and last week, Prince Andrew announced that he would no longer use his Duke of York title. Rawia, we will turn to you first of all on this story, which honestly, the more detail we get about this, and I'm concerned for tomorrow when we actually get the full book itself, every excerpt that I've seen today is harrowing.
Absolutely.
And this is a serious claim against Prince Andrew, but also the part about the bodyguards and him asking to dig up some dirt on Virginia Giuffre. How bad are the implications likely to be?
It is quite bad. They are very serious allegations, and they have basically prompted the police to conduct an investigation. They also have drawn a lot of criticism from politicians. It also made the ongoing scandal of these memoirs even more complicated for Prince Andrew. Now, there's intensifying pressure on Prince Andrew because of also his denial that he has anything to do with Giuffre, even though he paid her in a settlement, which poses a question: if you don't have anything to hide, why would you settle and pay somebody that much money for such a thing? So there is a lot of pressure. I suspect that once the book is out, even more pressure will be, there will be more criticism from the public, even from politicians. Now some MPs are calling for the removal of his title Prince, even though he has renounced a lot of his or most of his other titles. So it is quite serious, and we are just seeing the beginning of it, I think.
With these allegations, Esther, and Prince Andrew making the decision before the weekend, before we got the excerpts, to give up on his royal title as Duke, at least, it's a personal choice, do you think, or is it pressure from within the palace? Because there has to be some sort of damage limitation within the firm.
Oh, absolutely. It was not his choice. It was definitely led by King Charles, who I'm sure, like most of the country, has just had enough. I can tell you what happened, at least from my knowledge of sort of how journalists work in the British media. Someone from the Daily Mail, probably the head of the newspaper, called up Buckingham Palace and said, listen, we're going to run this story. We're giving you a courtesy call to get ahead of the curve, and in which case the king just said, right, we're stripping him of his titles. And, this is the end of it, because they have to get ahead of the story. We know that Ed Miliband, who's the energy secretary, also did an interview earlier this week and said that they're not going to run this through Parliament, because the king said he doesn't want to waste parliamentarians' time, because that's the actual formal process of revoking someone's titles. And he said that the government is happy to take the lead with that, is happy to let the royal family take the lead with how they want to handle Prince Andrew, because it's a private matter, quite clearly. But it's a really unfortunate thing for the royal family to have to deal with, because clearly from the infamous interview that Prince Andrew did with Emily Maitlis, he actually was more involved than Jeffrey Epstein a lot later on than he was willing to lead on. You have some of his defenders saying that he didn't actually call Epstein, but sending an emails and keeping in touch, which is just, it's just a ludicrous excuse. And then you have these bombshell allegations of him asking his personal protection officer to dig up dirt on Virginia Giuffre, as well as allegedly having access to her social security number, which we know that here in the US, it's an unlawful thing to do, to have access illegally to someone's social security number, which is basically key to many aspects of their lives. So it's whichever way you look at it, it's very, very terrible. And I think, stripping him of his titles was just the beginning, to be perfectly honest. We know that Prince William has not had any patience for his uncle in a very long time. And just in terms of the reputation for the royal family, this is a very bad look. You had Prince Harry suing the Home Office and spending so much money on these lawsuits to return his personal protection officer, and yet you have someone like Prince Andrew, who granted has to pay for his own security now, having access to a personal protection officer, and then effectively almost abusing that privilege by asking them to dig up dirt on a woman that he allegedly didn't meet, but there's a picture of them together, and then he allegedly didn't do anything wrong, but he's paying her £10 million as part of a settlement, allegedly. So it's, I think the only thing that the royal family can do right now is to banish him to a village in Goa and get him to serve butter chicken to a bunch of one-legged orphans for the rest of his life. He cannot continue to live in a mansion with over a dozen rooms and hold the privilege that he does, regardless of this, because any other person, if they weren't a member of the royal family, with these kinds of allegations, with the world's most famous sex offender, would be having the book thrown at them, and they'd be dealing with a lot more than just the Metropolitan Police, probing around.
But even at that, Esther, in taking the PPO and using what is a public-funded resource for such a purpose, even that in itself kind of begs a lot of questions. And as we say, the allegations that are there, and there are many of them at this case, it does beg the question, do you think there might be some, Rawia, and I'll turn this to you, reform that is needed within the firm, that is the British royal family is referred to as the firm, that they need to change some things?
There are many calls for that, especially after this scandal.
Right.
That some reform, some ways, some more structural way to strip members of the royal family of their royal titles in such cases of scandals or any cases that will damage the reputation of the British monarchy. There are many calls for this, and maybe, I mean, it's not far-fetched that we might see something like this in the future. I don't know legally whether this is something that should be started by the government or by the monarchy, but I mean, it is a conversation, it's a debate out there, and it is something that can possibly happen. I
guess what's heartbreaking about this story, Esther, and we're speaking about somebody whose memoirs are being released tomorrow, someone who has committed suicide in April of this year. And we have to look at the direct implications from the story that has been there, the allegations that have been before Prince Andrew, the settlement that has gone before this memoir has been released and everything that goes with it. There is still a victim that's at play here who is somewhat being overshadowed by the fact that the alleged perpetrator of the abuse is somebody of such a high profile in being Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein.
And I think there's no doubt in anyone's minds that, you know, Prince Andrew is just the tip of this iceberg. And I'm sure there are many high-power, high-profile individuals that were caught up in Jeffrey Epstein's web of sexual abuse that to some extent have got off scot-free. We don't know the Jeffrey Epstein list. I mean, how can some people be serving time for trafficking girls to no one? It doesn't make sense. But it's really quite unfortunate. I think... You know, I think what will happen practically is some sort of legislation in Parliament that will allow the royal family to strip members of their titles without need to go through Parliament, because I think that's one of the biggest hurdles. And if you look at other royal houses across Europe, from Norway to Denmark, you've seen a streamlining of their royal families, which is basically the monarch, their spouse, and then the immediate line of succession. So no second, third child having all these benefits and privileges. And so what you might end up seeing, and I think this is quite likely, especially from insiders in the royal family, is Prince William is probably going to do that. He's probably going to strip his niece, nephew, and certainly his brother and sister-in-law of their titles, as well as Prince Andrew, if he can get away with it, because you just want to keep the most relevant people in the firm and the headlines. I do feel a little bit sorry for Prince Harry that he had his personal security stripped. One, because obviously he wasn't in the UK, but two, effectively because him and his wife are annoying. And I don't think any Metropolitan Police wanted to stomach having to basically be on guard for whenever they fancied coming to the UK. But really what this is saying is that the royal family should have a lot more power and control in managing its internal affairs before it gets to this point. Prince Andrew should have never had access to the kinds of funds that he did to pay off Virginia Giuffre. He should have never had access to the kind of cover-up that, you know, being his mother's favourite child afforded him. He should still not be living in a multi-million-pound mansion with over a dozen rooms that he doesn't need. It's a complete insult, regardless of how many titles you strip him of. And
Prince Andrew, as I said, denies the allegations, but to take away something from what these memoirs will have in them tomorrow, I guess Virginia Giuffre has left somewhat of a legacy for people to now look and see the story that otherwise may not have been told, Rawia, which, if there's anything that's positive that you can take away from the tragic death of a very young lady, is that perhaps maybe her story will finally be told in the way that she intended.
Yes, her story, definitely, and potentially future stories. I mean, hopefully that would not happen. You know, the information in the memoir possibly can open the eyes of young girls that fall into this web of sex trafficking, and you know, they end up in such situations as Giuffre here. But the thing is, this is the thing about this case, the Epstein case. The Epstein list, okay, we don't know the details of the names, but the nature of the names, they're all high-profile names.
Yeah.
Just before I entered, I was reading that another name she mentions apparently in her memoirs is, she talked about a very famous prime minister, an Israeli prime minister. It's Ehud Barak as well. And the details that she mentions are truly gruesome. And she says that this is the case after being with this prime minister. That is what prompted her to break the Epstein, to break out of this Epstein circle. So definitely, it's definitely heartbreaking. We're going to see a lot of scandal and a lot of.
But I think justifiable scandal, because people who are in a high-profile position from these allegations or anywhere need to be held accountable for their actions.
Of course, nobody should. There's no impunity. There has to.
Absolutely.
Everybody should be accountable, and it doesn't matter if you're a high profile, you're a prince, you're a prime minister, or anything. I mean, this is all illegal, immoral, and you should be held accountable for it.
Well, the memoirs are out tomorrow, so once they are out, I'm sure we'll have more details and we'll find out more about the allegations as well. Well, we're going to move on to something a lot lighter. It's that time of the show where both Rawia and Esther share the stories of the day that they found from the quirkier side of the news. Rawia, let's turn to you first. A major internet outage today, a little bit of a panic for a lot of people. Tell us a bit more about why we may have had a panic on Snapchat.
Yes, apparently all the internet and the social media apps lovers basically had to suffer a bit. There was a major outage basically that affected half the internet. Millions of people were left unable to access their favorite sites and apps like Snapchat, Fortnite, Duolingo. Apparently the underlying issue has been fully mitigated, fixed apparently, yet the operations are now running normally, yet so many people have been affected by this power outage. Apparently the reason was some problems with the Amazon Web Service, which is a cloud computing service that powers much of the infrastructure behind any websites, especially to do with Amazon. Like a lot of the Amazon services were halted, basically, or they came to a halt, like Amazon.com, Amazon Alexa, Ring, and Amazon Video.
It's such a panic. And somebody tripped over the wire and now all of a sudden Amazon is off. But this was, we may not have been able to speak to you, Esther, had this gone, because Zoom was down for a little while today. Snapchat was down. I wouldn't know because I'm not a 14-year-old. But that was
bank
down.
apps as well, by the way. It's not just social media and.
It was a real panic. And again, this kind of gives you that realization that we're very reliant on the internet, and that panics me a lot, because then when you realize when it's not there, how do you communicate? Did you feel the effects of this in Florida today?
I did not. I was reading. So, this might be a good advertisement for people that spend too much time online. Just pick up a book and read. It is quite scary, the reliance that we have. But I think for me, the bigger implications and the more terrifying implications are things like digital ID, basically any form of government regulated identification, or things that you need government approval, digital government approval to do, like accessing bank accounts or whatever. All of these systems, I think people don't realize there's a significant overlap between public and private infrastructure when it comes to these hosting services. Many governments around the world don't have sort of private servers under the ocean. They would use Amazon service as well, just because of it's more cost effective, it's more reliable. And so the terrifying thing is, if these sort of servers go down, can you access your money? Are you able to use your government-issued digital ID? These are the more significant implications, as opposed to the 14-year-old being unable to hit up girls on Snapchat, which I'm sure is a minor concern. In
other really important stuff that didn't happen, I spent 5 hours not buying anything from Amazon today. So their stocks and shares likely are after taking a bit of a hit on that. A lot of people would have been affected by that.
Well, it looks like you daily shop at Amazon.
I've persevered through today's small outage, so luckily we're fine. Esther, yours is to something that took the internet by storm, a lettuce that we'll all remember very fondly, that's now been immortalised. Tell us more.
Yes, so the British Film Institute has decided to add the lettuce that lasted longer than Liz Truss's premiership. I'm sure you can remember from a couple of years ago. It has now been added to the National Archive, and this is the kind of sense of humour that the Brits are known for, because it's basically the immortalisation of a meme. I don't know how they've immortalised that lettuce. I don't know if it's been cryogenically frozen or if it's been freeze-dried, but basically this lettuce will always be a reminder for Liz Truss that her premiership crashed and burned spectacularly, and the British public made do by basically immortalizing a lettuce. And unfortunately for Liz Truss, who seems for some reason to keep popping up in British media or doing the speaking circuit in North America and parts of Europe, this is always going to be a thorn in her side, because even when she wants to draw attention to issues that she felt like were important or that basically torpedoed her premiership, she's always just going to have comparisons drawn to a head of lettuce. And unfortunately, once those kinds of things stick, there's really no way to get around it.
Does Liz Truss have anything aside from this, do you think, Rawia, as her legacy that she leaves behind, aside from being outlasted by a lettuce in office?
I don't know, to be honest.
I mean, I think it was one of those, it's a meme that again makes it becomes so part of the human psyche that you think is now part of a museum attraction.
I mean, this is the entire point, that we are at an age where the things that are being immortalized are so different than what we would have idealized and thought we need to immortalize, you know, 10 or 20 years ago.
Oh, gone are Picasso.
But now, I know, but this is today, I suppose.
Well, listen, on that note is where we will leave it. A massive thanks to our guests, both in the studio, Al Arabiya's senior presenter, Rawia Alami, and to writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue, who joined us live from Florida. Thank you so much to both of you. And that is all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget, as always, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on X as well. Goodbye for now.